Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Reiser in for Vladimir Duthier. We are watching all the news happening in the U.S. and around the world. This is CBS News 24/7. Israel rescues a hostage abducted in Hamas's October 7th attack. We'll have breaking details on what the IDF is calling a complex operation to bring the 52-year-old man home. A late summer heat wave brings dangerously high temperatures to parts of the country. When Americans can expect some relief. And program on hold. A federal judge temporarily blocks the Biden administration from granting legal status to undocumented spouses of American citizens. We begin with breaking news out of Israel. The Israeli military saying it has rescued a hostage who was abducted in the October 7th attacks by Hamas. Now, the IDF says 52-year-old Kaid Farhan Al-Qadi is in stable medical condition. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams is following the very latest. Holly, what details are we learning about this rescue?
Good morning, Lindsay. This story has just broken in the last couple of hours. The rescued hostage, or I guess former hostage now, is a 52-year-old man, Kaid Farhan Al-Qadi, who is an Arab Israeli. He is a member of Israel's Bedouin Arab minority. According to an Israeli hostage family group, he is a father of 11. And we've seen quite moving video this morning already that appears to show his family members racing to meet him in a hospital following his rescue, though we haven't seen any video or images so far of the actual reunion taking place. Mr. Al-Qadi was apparently working as a security guard in a kibbutz in southern Israel near the border with Gaza before the October 7th attacks. The Israeli military says that he was rescued in a, quote, complex operation in southern Gaza. Israeli army radio is reporting that he was rescued from a tunnel, apparently the first rescue from a tunnel during this war. But at this point, we don't have much more detail from Israel's military than that. It's thought that many of the remaining hostages are being held in tunnels, and we know that Hamas militants have built a web of tunnels underneath the Gaza Strip. Around 100 hostages are thought to be held in Gaza, though some of them are thought at this point to be dead. Around 250 hostages were taken on October 7th, and then in November, over 100 captives were released during a brief ceasefire. Now, negotiations in Cairo, Egypt are ongoing, where the U.S. is trying to broker a deal to bring those remaining hostages home and achieve a lasting ceasefire. Lindsay.
Holly, thank you. Happening right now in federal court, the first rioter to enter the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th insurrection faces sentencing, where he could get at least 4 years in prison. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland is standing outside the U.S. District Court in D.C. Scott, what can you tell us about this case?
It's a landmark case. He was the first Capitol rioter to enter the building. Excuse me. His name is Michael Sparks. He went through a smashed window and was part of the group that confronted that lone Capitol officer outside the Senate, Eugene Goodman. Michael Sparks' case, like so many, has spanned years, as this January 6th prosecution, the largest in American history, takes quite a bit of time to process through the court system. He's not accused of unique violence on that day, but he was the first of hundreds to breach the U.S. Capitol, though his defense attorney will argue here today he wasn't a leader, he was just technically first. The Department of Justice will seek 57 months in prison for Michael Sparks. One of the allegations that's uniquely weight-bearing here is the Department of Justice is going to argue today that Michael Sparks knew the congressional roll on January 6th, knew the significance of that day for certifying the election, and that was his motivation for being here that day. Not going to make the argument he was caught up in the moment or unknowingly following the crowd. They're going to argue he knew exactly what a mob could do January 6th, stopping the count of an election for the first time in American history. This is a landmark case, Lindsay, but just one of 1,500 cases they brought.
Scott, I'm going to ask you another question about Trump's federal classified documents case in case you want to clear your throat or get a sip of water. Of course, it's when we start talking on live TV that this happens, right, that we get the tickle. But special counsel Jack Smith and his team are appealing the judge's decision throwing out this case essentially over the grounds of how the special counsel is funded and appointed. What is the special counsel's team arguing legally, and what happens next in this case?
And they're arguing that Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee to the court in 2020, has defied precedent by making this novel ruling that a special counsel wasn't properly appointed and wasn't properly funded. They say that runs counter to previous cases, including, oh, by the way, the Nixon case in 1974. They're also arguing that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has rejected Judge Cannon before on other matters in this case, should override that dismissal, remand the case back to court for further deliberations and further proceedings. This is going to take some time, though, Lindsay. This type of appeal will take months to work its way through. It's not going to happen at the drop of a hat later this week. But at this point, any prospect of having this case before the election has long since evaporated, so time is no longer of the essence in this type of case.
Scott McFarland, thank you so much. Well, the Midwest is battling a dangerous late summer heat wave. Some students are headed back to class, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of these scorching temperatures. So schools across Wisconsin, Iowa, Philadelphia, they are closing due to some of these excessive temperatures. CBS News Detroit reporter Jordan Burrows joins us from Detroit, Michigan, where there are excessive heat warnings and gusty rain. I can see it looks like the road behind you is slick, Jordan. How high are the temperatures expected to get today?
Lindsay, it's really been a tale of two weather stories today. Right now, it's windy and rainy, only about 75 degrees. But later today, around 5 in the evening, is the peak of this extreme dangerous heat at around 95 degrees, and those feel-like temperatures reaching triple digits. So today, the reason we're live outside of Cass Tech High School in downtown Detroit is because the school will be letting out in just about a couple hours after noon, 3 hours early. That's because of this heat. They let out early yesterday, which was the first day of the school year. Today, the second day of the school year, they're letting out early, and that's even a possibility tomorrow. More than 100 schools within Detroit Public Schools Community District are letting out early because of this dangerous heat wave. Lindsay?
Hey, Jordan, how are people dealing with the extended heat, and when can you guys get some relief?
That relief actually could come by tomorrow, but I'll tell you what, parents were not happy with this decision because they thought it was brash and they did it too soon. They said they wish that administrators had checked the weather ahead of time, but most say that they're lucky that their kids are able to come home and get inside the air conditioning, because some schools within Detroit Public Schools don't have air conditioning, but they did tell us that within a 5-year span, they will make sure that all 106 schools within the school district have air conditioning. Parents, nonetheless, at around 12:20 will be here at Cass Tech to pick up their students.
All right. Thanks, Jordan. You can understand how some parents now have to scramble, but yeah, it looks like safety first there, especially in those areas that don't have AC. Thank you so much. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at the national forecast. Grant, closing schools.
I know. You think back to school, you start to get into some of the cooler temperatures, and that's quite the opposite. You know, the heat continues across the Midwest today, and look, the heat's going to continue to advance to the east as we go into the day tomorrow. So several places underneath either heat advisories or excessive heat warnings. In fact, 75.3 million people today underneath either that heat advisory or excessive heat warning. The ridge of high pressure that's fueling this heat wave will shift to the east, but today, look at all these places, if not actually reaching the triple digits, feels like temperatures well into the triple digits. St. Louis is going to rival a record high temperature today with highs around 100 degrees. Feels like temperatures up around 110 degrees. That heat advances to the east up into where I am in Philadelphia, where tomorrow temperatures will be around 96. Feels like temperatures there well into the triple digits, 105, maybe some places 110 degrees. But we mentioned severe weather. We'll talk about that a little later on. But that severe weather will ultimately bring some relief to the Midwest. Places like Chicago going from the 90s today, places like Detroit as well, to the low 80s tomorrow afternoon. So fall is closer tomorrow, but still summer very much in effect today into the East Coast tomorrow. Lindsay, we'll talk more about that severe threat coming up in just a bit.
I don't know. I know people love summer, but I'm a fall girl, so I'm looking forward to it. Grant, thank you so much. I want to bring in CBS News national environmental correspondent David Schechter. David, there is a new study out this morning about the rising number of heat-related deaths in this country. And this is a staggering statistic. It showed since 1999, heat-related deaths have increased 117%. What did this report find?
Well, this is the first of its kind study that examined heat-related mortality in the U.S., so it's a bit of a landmark study. And they looked at the years 1999 to 2023, and they found an overall increase in deaths during those years. They found more than 20,000 deaths were recorded related to heat for underlying or contributing causes of death. So heat could be the first cause of death, but could also be contributing to that person's death. But over the last 7 years, they found an acceleration of that trend. And because of climate change, experts believe that that trend will continue to accelerate into the future.
There's a national protocol called Cool First, Heat Second that could prevent some heat-related illnesses and deaths. Only 11 states require it. What is this protocol?
So Cool First, Transport Second means you think in an emergency, an ambulance would show up and it's like, let's get this person to the hospital right away. But the idea is that an ambulance would carry ice in a bag and make ice water and put a heat victim or a heat patient into this bag to immediately cool them down. It's essential because there's like a 30-minute window where your internal organs, if you've got heat stroke, are essentially cooking. And you have that amount of time to get the body temperature down. So if you get to the patient on site, cool them immediately, you can essentially save their lives, save their internal organs, and then transport. But if they're in the ambulance right away and it takes 10 or 20 minutes to get to the hospital, you have not arrested that heat in the body, and so that person is still in deep jeopardy. We found in some of our research that only 11 states have a policy like this, but it's cheap and it's life-saving, it's efficient, it's fast, and it's amazing that it's not more widely used.
You are in Dallas. I understand in Texas that people are actually using smartwatch technology to try and prevent, basically as a preventative measure, right?
Yeah, we went to a construction site here that is piloting smartwatches. They voluntarily let their construction workers take on these watches, and then the managers are back in their office. They've got a dashboard. They can see what the body temperature and the heart rate is doing in some of these workers, as can the workers. So if your body is too warm for too long, as a worker, you'll get an alert that says, hey, take a break. And if it gets really kind of to a much more dangerous level where you might be approaching heat stroke, the worker gets an alert, the managers get an alert, and they can immediately sort of intervene in a situation like this. It's really cool to see smartwatch technology as a solution to heat stroke, and heat problems, which are, as we talked about in the beginning of this report, are just getting worse.
All right, David, thank you so much for your reporting. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the Biden administration's efforts to help 500,000 immigrants become U.S. citizens. CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is following this story for us. Nancy, can you explain what this ruling and halting means for the program?
Yes, I can, Lindsay. So this is a ruling that came down from a federal judge in Texas overnight, putting a 2-week pause, though it could be extended, on a new administration policy that, as you pointed out, has the potential to affect 500,000 people. And this was a policy designed earlier this summer specifically for unauthorized migrants who are living in this country because they are married to a U.S. citizen. And it enabled those individuals who are both married to a U.S. citizen, have been in this country for 10 years or more, to apply for a temporary work permit and, if they qualify, to get some protection from deportation. And the reason that the policy was designed this way, Lindsay, is because the administration said that the way it works right now for these individuals, if they want to apply for citizenship, they often have to leave the country. They are separated from their families for a long period of time. So that's the problem that the administration was trying to address. But a group of Republican attorneys general, about a dozen and a half of them gathered together. They argued that this was the administration going around Congress, and they went to court, and now the judge is giving both sides until early October to file briefs. Again, he's paused this program for 2 weeks. It just went into effect last week. They just started taking applications. Now they've had to pause that process, pause in place for 2 weeks for now, and could be expanded.
How's the White House responding?
We haven't heard from the White House itself, but we have heard from the Department of Homeland Security, part of the administration, which says that this program, which is called Keeping Families Together, they say it enables U.S. citizens and their family members to live without fear of separation. They say they'll abide by the judge's order, so they've paused taking applications for now, but they argue that this is a policy that was just starting to work, and they'd like to see it resume as soon as possible.
Okay, Nancy, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
More than 200 former Republican staffers are throwing their support behind Vice President Kamala Harris's 2024 bid. What they're warning could happen if former President Trump returns to the White House. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. And now to the race for the White House. More than 200 Republicans who worked for both former President Bush's Senator John McCain and Senator Mitt Romney have endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for president. The group penned a letter saying, in part, democracy would be, quote, irreparably jeopardized by another Trump administration. Joining me for more on this is the Harris campaign is CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, how significant is it that this new GOP group is putting support behind Harris?
Well, good morning. This was actually a group of folks. Some of them did the same letter for President Biden's campaign in 2020. About 150 former Republican presidential administration staffers signed a similar letter saying that electing Trump is untenable. You're seeing 200 this time for Harris, and they range from, former interns on the campaign for John McCain in 2008 to a longtime chief of staff for George H.W. Bush, as well as a former staffer to W. Bush, as well as former Vice President Mike Pence. But it is in line with the argument the Harris campaign is making that they have bipartisan support, and that follows several Republican speakers at the convention in Chicago last week.
Harris has released 3 new ads, Aaron, to highlight her economic policy. The campaign is also embarking on a bus tour this week in Georgia. Where would you say the campaign is focused right now?
Right now, it is focused on affordable housing. They have over 20 events this week dedicated to that part of her plan, which, includes cracking down on what she calls exploitative landlords, a mission to build 3 million new homes, as well as offer more incentives for first-time home buyers. And the new ad from her campaign this morning really ties it to her own story, talking about how her mom had to save money to buy their first home. And that's going to be the focus for the campaign as they continue to try and define her on the economy, an issue Trump usually does better on in the polling as they get into this home stretch of the race.
Has the Harris campaign given any indication as to whether she'll do a formal interview? I know that the Trump-Vance ticket has really been criticizing her hard on that recently.
Right. And she has said she would do it by the end of the month. Obviously, the days are ticking. There has been no formal announcement yet on when or who that interview they'll be doing it with. But, a couple of days left in the month. We'll see if that changes during this bus tour or any other travel this week.
So it sounds like we may know by the end of the month, but the interview itself isn't going to take place by the end of the month, right?
The interview will take place by the end of the month is what the campaign has said. Yep.
Okay. Aaron, thank you so much.
Take care.
Meanwhile, during his stop in Virginia yesterday, when asked about muted microphones during the debate, Trump said, quote, doesn't matter to me. I'd rather have it probably on. But he still made it unclear whether he'll commit to the September 10th debate. So joining me now for more on this is CBS News campaign reporter Libby Cathy. So Libby, what's the latest reporting from the Trump side on this debate issue?
Hi, Lindsay. Yes, well, the Trump campaign says that the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign is trying to change the rules now, that they're objecting to having the mics be turned off now that they want the mics hot, they say this is an indication that Harris herself is worried. Of course, Kamala Harris's campaign says that is not the case. They consider the matter settled now after, as you said, former President Trump yesterday in Virginia said it doesn't matter to him, that he would probably prefer to have the mics on. So a lot can happen in 2 weeks, as we've seen with this election, Lindsay. But for now, that debate is supposed to be 2 weeks from today. And former President Trump is preparing for that debate with Tulsi Gabbard, the former congresswoman who was on the campaign trail with him yesterday. And as he's making these stops on the trail, he does not miss the moment to criticize ABC, the network that will be hosting the debate. So we will see if that actually happens. Lindsay.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, of course, ended his campaign last week, told Tucker Carlson he was asked to join Trump's potential transition team if he's reelected. Have we heard anything from the Trump team about this?
Yeah, Lindsay, so Trump himself has toyed with the idea of bringing RFK Jr. on, potentially maybe as a cabinet member if he wins, particularly in the last week since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. dropped out of the campaign, had endorsed Trump for president. So yes, yesterday, as you said, RFK Jr. told Tucker Carlson that he was being considered for a Trump transition post. Specifically, quote, he said, to help pick out the people who will be running government. But this is not something that the Trump campaign or Trump himself has confirmed. But yes, Trump has toyed with the idea. He's seeing RFK Jr. as a friend, as an ally, now that he's gotten out of the campaign, Lindsay.
We know that RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard are controversial figures. What does your reporting tell you about the Trump campaign, bringing them in and working so closely with them? I mean, do they risk potentially alienating voters?
Well, they could, some of those undecided voters, but Trump's base typically is going to be on board with whatever he's doing, whoever he is appearing with. And this week, that is Tulsi Gabbard. Last week, that was RF Kennedy Jr., a little bit more even than J.D. Vance, his vice president. I think that Trump likes to have people that will talk him up, and he knows that if Gabbard gets out there, RFK Jr., these people have been saying what Trump wants to hear. So it's to be seen whether this will, hurt Trump, but certainly he thinks that this is helping them, and he continues to campaign with them. We'll see if he campaigns more with RFK. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Sounds good. Well, one of the nation's largest Latino civil rights organizations is demanding a federal investigation into the Texas Attorney General over a series of raids his office conducted. We're going to have those details ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. Here's a look at the top stories we're following. An investigation is underway after a woman died at Burning Man. It happened on day one of the arts festival in Nevada's Black Rock Desert over the weekend. Now, it's unclear how she died, but the festival's emergency services team found 39-year-old Kendra Fraser unresponsive Sunday morning. Burning Man's organizers say safety is their top priority, and they're cooperating with local authorities. SpaceX is delaying its historic Polaris Dawn launch for at least another day due to a helium leak. The capsule carrying 4 private citizens is now scheduled to lift off tomorrow morning at the earliest. The 5-day mission is expected to include the first ever spacewalk by non-government astronauts. And the capsule is supposed to travel almost 900 miles above Earth. That's more than 600 miles farther than the International Space Station and farther than any crewed mission since the Apollo 17 launch in 1972. Torrential rains and surging floodwaters killed at least 30 people in Sudan and washed out at least 20 villages. The local media reports dozens more are missing. A dam collapsed after days of heavy rain Monday. This is just the latest crisis to hit a region already reeling from a 16-month-long civil war. It is a wild week of weather in the Midwest as scorching hot temperatures rise. Classes are canceled for many students in states with excessive heat warnings. Let's check in with CBS News Chicago reporter Mugo Odigwe. Mugo, how are people handling the high temperatures there?
Yeah, well, good morning to you. I can tell you, first off, it is very, very hot right now. And what a difference a few hours makes, because we were out here around 4:30 this morning for our live shot at 4:30 Chicago time, by the way. It is now 9:30 Chicago time, and it is a huge difference. When we got out here this morning, I was telling a photojournalist, Aaron Cooper, that it feels very, very cool, actually. I was a little chilly, and now it's very hot. And as you can expect, it's very difficult for people to basically go out and about and maintain themselves. We have seen a few people who are out and about the lakefront behind me, this beautiful view, running earlier this morning. That is no longer the case. I really don't even see that many people out here right now, and that's because it's hot. Now, the Chicago Public School District, we know this is the third largest district in the country. Just yesterday, that was the first day of school for students. And what school officials basically said is that all outdoor sporting games will be canceled completely, and all outdoor sporting practices will have to be moved inside, that along with recess as well. And that is the same story today. So clearly, school officials here trying to make sure students are able to beat the heat. They have told us air conditioning in all of their school buildings right now are working, but if anything changes, students will likely be sent home, which is the story over in our neighboring Indiana. The school district, the Gary, Indiana School District, we know that one of their elementary schools canceled today completely, and that's because just yesterday the school building lost air conditioning, and students were actually sent home early just yesterday. So again, some of just how some people are trying to deal with the heat, especially with young kids who have to stay safe during weather conditions like this. The city of Chicago, though, doing their parts to make sure that people are staying cool, especially the elderly. So over 200 cooling centers, both in Chicago, which is part of Cook County, but over 200 cooling centers in Cook County are open right now. The centers for seniors is going to be open through Friday. Again, just making sure that seniors are able to beat the heat. We know churches are joining in as well. There's a church in one of the neighborhoods here in Chicago that is basically going to be passing out cold bottles of water to families, anyone who needs it. So I think the best way to put this is for those who don't have a reason to be inside. This is certainly one of those days to to be outside rather. This is certainly one of those days to just stay inside and try to cool off, because even just a few minutes outside, I had to hop out of the truck for this live shot, and the minute I stepped outside, I wanted to go back in. So and I know I smile when I say this, but this can be very, very dangerous. One last thing before I let you go here. We know we're supposed to hit the upper 90s today, but if we hit 98 degrees, we could actually break a record. As for the heat index, that's the feels like temperature, we're talking between 110 degrees to 115 degrees. So this is not a day to go outside for a run in the middle of the afternoon. I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, Mugo Digwe and Aaron Cooper, you guys stay cool. Get back in that truck. Thank you so much. So let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Yeah, Grant, those heat indexes, that's what you want to look at.
Oh, it really is true, and you really don't feel it in the morning, but once that sun comes up and you start getting the rising temperature and the humidity starts to take effect, forget about it. I mean, look at this. Chicago right now, 82 degrees, many places starting their day with temperatures in the upper 70s and lower 80s. All of this heat across the Midwest is going to shift to the East Coast as we go through the next 24 hours, and that's why we continue to work with these heat advisories, excessive heat warnings across a good portion of the Midwest and now into the Northeast. In fact, over 75 million people underneath either a heat advisory or an excessive heat warning today into the day tomorrow. Look at all of these records that will be in jeopardy today. South Bend, Indiana, approaching 100 degrees this afternoon. Record today is 96 degrees. St. Louis, same thing. Triple-digit temperatures today. The record's 102. It'll be close. Peoria, Illinois, 97 the high. The record is 98. Down the line, Chicago's record high temperature is 97. We're forecasting a high of 95. We'll see. It'll be really close today. That ridge of high pressure that's just pumping in all of that heat and humidity into the Midwest, that shifts to the east tomorrow. So places across the Midwest today that are approaching the triple digits, or at least near triple digits, but feeling like the triple digits, all of that heat slides to the east tomorrow. Places like where I am now in Philadelphia, we're looking at forecast highs tomorrow around 96, but feeling like anywhere between 100 to 110 degrees. It's almost September. You're talking about mid-prime summer heat, and it is feeling more like that, but it is almost fall, which we'd like to feel like. Chicago, you will get there after a threat for some severe weather later on tonight. Temperatures will be in the mid-80s. By Saturday, things clear out. Actually looking pretty nice for the start to the Labor Day weekend with high temperatures Saturday afternoon around 84 degrees. We mentioned the threat for severe weather. That's what's going to fuel the showers and storms today, is all that heat 28 million people at risk for severe weather today across the Midwest. That threat for severe weather will shift to the east tomorrow, along with all of that heat. A look around the rest of the country. We got rain back into the desert Southwest, some monsoon moisture there. It's hot in California, back into the desert, but cooler air now beginning to move into the Northeast. Places like Seattle today, Lindsay, peaking at 66 degrees. There's your fall weather. It's coming.
We'll take that. Grant, thanks so much.
That's right.
Local geologists are assessing the potential for future landslides in Alaska. Sunday's landslide in the city of Ketchikan killed one person and injured 3 others. Evacuation orders are still in place after the state's governor issued a disaster declaration. Latino activists are calling for a federal investigation into a series of raids conducted by the man you see here, Texas Attorney General in his office, Ken Paxton. Now, his office says these undercover operations are happening in response to reports that some organizations may be unlawfully registering non-citizens to vote. But the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, is denouncing the raids as, quote, point-blank voter intimidation. Our Omar Villafranca is in San Antonio following this. So, Omar, yesterday, LULAC members held a press conference outside the AG's office in San Antonio. What's the latest?
Hey, what's going on?
Well, yesterday at that press conference, they were upset, obviously, with the raids, and especially some of the people that were targeted, including one woman who we talked to, an 87-year-old woman who's been a volunteer for decades and worked on campaigns in South Texas for the long time. They were upset about some of the tactics. We're talking, people who are armed showing up at homes at 6 in the morning with search warrants going in. They are, as you mentioned, they think this is targeted. While Attorney General Paxton says this is for voter integrity and election integrity, LULAC is saying that this is voter intimidation and suppression in their opinion. And they have actually written to the Department of Justice asking for an investigation into what happened here and what is going on, which is part of Attorney General Paxton's ongoing investigation.
Has Paxton's office responded to LULAC's concerns?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Has Paxton's office responded to LULAC's concerns?
Listen, we reached out to Attorney General Paxton's office, and we have not heard back at all. So specific on LULAC's accusations, Paxton's office has not said anything at all. He has said about the investigation, which is part of a voter integrity unit, that he's working to basically keep voter integrity intact in the state of Texas. But as far as the complaints made by LULAC and the accusations, nothing yet.
Can you explain a little bit more about LULAC and what they do?
Yeah, LULAC, as you mentioned, the League of United Latin American Citizens, they're the oldest and biggest Latino civil rights groups. Everything from education to healthcare to economic issues, especially very powerful here in South Texas, where there is obviously a big Hispanic American population down here. And they also, like groups, they assert political influence. They have voter registration drives and try to get people registered to vote and things like that, and make them aware of elections and stuff that are going on and issues that are happening down here. But they're longstanding. They're not a new organization by any means at all. And so this is what's surprising to LULAC and also to people, observers elsewhere, saying what's going on. You have a state going against the longest serving the longest and the biggest Latino organization. What's going on? Still a lot of unanswered questions.
Okay, keep us posted on what happens next, Omar. Thank you.
Thank you.
We just got some new data about the state of the housing market, what it signals about our economy, and what you need to know next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We want to take you to Michigan now, where EPA officials are talking about cleanup efforts from a deadly building explosion earlier this year. Let's listen.
I would be concerned too, and that's why we've been out here evaluating site conditions. So during all intrusive activities, we have particulate monitoring. We also have air monitoring. The air monitoring is for VOCs, volatile organic compounds, hydrogen sulfide, LEL. It's a basic 5-gas sensor. The particulates are for visible emissions. So they're 2.5, 1.0, 10 in total particulates. It's basically what the public would see when they see construction and demo crews and they see visible emissions. We do not want visible emissions off this site. We have site controls. We have perimeter air monitoring, perimeter particulate monitoring that tells us in real time what are the perimeter levels. So outside of just visually seeing stuff, we can apply engineering and administrative controls. We can use wet methods. We are very cognizant of how dense this area is in terms of the active commercial entities and residential subdivisions. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
What's the timetable for the cleanup? I heard it was 100 days. Is that still holding?
As of right now, we're projecting 100 on-site working days. So, we have holidays. We have contractors that per contracts have to come on site, come off site. We have off-hour security. So, for concerns of what happens when EPA is not physically on site, we have worked with our Clinton Township representatives, the fire department, the police department. They're very aware, the township supervisor, very aware of EPA's presence here on site. And they have actively engaged us from day one. And they know that this site is being monitored by off-hour security.
All right, everybody, we have been listening in to the coordinator on site with the EPA here at the site of this warehouse, which was storing chemicals that exploded in March. One person died as a result. He's saying that the target for them to wrap up is 100 on-site days for the cleanup effort. We're going to continue to monitor this and bring you updates as they come in. New data this morning shows U.S. house prices rose 5.7% over the last year. However, prices fell 0.1% from May to June. For more on today's data, I want to bring in CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin, who is joining us live from the New York Stock Exchange. J.D., good to see you. What does today's data tell us about the state of the U.S. housing market?
Well, Lindsay, you said it exactly right there, my friend. It's a bit of a mixed bag, right? Because month over month, we saw the number fall. Quarter over quarter, we did see it go up, and you're right there. From the same time a year ago to this quarter a year later, up 5.7% here. So, it's good to have that little bit of monthly relief. And I look back at the long-term data this morning. Lindsay, you go all the way back to the great financial crisis. Most of these month-over-month increases have been exactly that. They have been increases. So the decrease, even if it is only 0.1%, will certainly be welcomed by many. Oh, aside from the wonkiness overall of the numbers, this does show the third consecutive slowdown in quarterly home prices growth, slower pace of appreciation for home prices for single-family homes in the month of June. But Lindsay, as we've talked about all the time, we still got that really stubborn 30-year fixed-rate mortgage still right around 6.5%, really sets the stage for the high expectations for the central bank to cut interest rates on September 18th.
You're doing my job for me. What are you watching for when the Fed meets next month?
I am looking for the Fed to cut interest rates on September 18th, and that's because everyone here on Wall Street, Lindsay, is expecting the Fed to do exactly that. The debate, of course, is it 0.25%? Is it 0.5%? And ultimately, as it pertains to this conversation of mortgage rates, it's really going to take a very long time, especially if we start off with these kind of baby interest rate cuts, 0.25%, or in fancy Wall Street parlance, 25 basis points. The senior housing economist at Wells Fargo only expects that 30-year fixed mortgage to go down to 5.9% by the end of 2025. That's not a lot of progress over the course of the next year or so. He says we're looking for rates to come down over the next 18 months, but honestly, not by all that much. It's going to be a while into this rate cutting cycle before we really see that progress on the mortgage side of things.
Wow. Okay. Important for people to know. All right. Before we let you go, there's new data on consumer confidence. What does that new data tell us? And right now, how is the market responding to all this new data that we're getting?
I've got a bird's eye view up here at the balcony at the New York Stock Exchange. The S&P 500 has turned into positive territory in the last half hour or so, but fractionally. The Dow is about flat or so, but it is coming off its all-time high yesterday. Maybe a bit of selling, so kind of a mixed bag overall. But the numbers for consumer confidence show us that confidence is there, at least for now. What's fascinating about this piece of data, it asks consumers, Lindsay, to weigh in not just how do you feel about your situation today, but where do you think things are going 6 months from now? It's a bit of a different story. Less optimism 6 months down the road for things like single or family income and the outlook for inflation and personal spending. But for now, it remains strong. One of the many data points we track to get a sense on just how healthy the economy is and how strong consumers think that it is.
So we've been getting very granular in this segment, JD, which I love that we do, but we know that the economy has been a political football this election cycle. We've got some great data. It's not necessarily matching up with how people feel. How would you describe the total picture of our economy right now?
I mean, it's a matter of you ask 10 people what the economy is, you get 10 different answers. A lot of people will tell you, hey, I don't feel good about the economy because gas, rent, and food is still far too expensive. Yet a lot of these big, sweeping macroeconomic data points point to a very strong economy. I think politically, you're exactly right. It is the football back and forth. It is up to both campaigns, the Trump and the Harris campaign, to continue to make that argument to the American people, especially on prices. You're hearing that a lot from the vice president and the Democratic Party. We will do more work to bring down those prices, which clearly all Americans are still feeling. Even if we've made progress on inflation, Lindsay, we're still feeling those prices because we all remember how cheap things were in 2019, and those aren't exactly the prices we're dealing with in today's economy.
Or that we might deal with in the very near future. JD Durkin, thank you so much. We continue to track a dangerous heat wave scorching parts of the Midwest right now. We're going to tell you who needs to be on high alert next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. We are following some of the big stories happening at stations across the country. Here in New York City, a big fire overnight destroyed several homes. CBS News' New York, Elijah Westbrook has more from Ocean Hill, Brooklyn.
Well, right now we are reporting in Ocean Hill, Brooklyn, where right across the street from where we're standing was where a 4-alarm fire took place. So we're being told at this time that at least 9 people were taken to the hospital. 6 of those 9 individuals are firefighters, and 3 of them are residents who lived in this building you see right now. This was a massive fire, we're being told, by the FDNY, one that took about 3 hours just to get under control. It all started around 10:30 Monday night, but it wasn't until 1:30 this morning that the flames and the thick black smoke that was seen shooting from the roofs of these buildings here managed to get under control. It's unclear right now exactly how all of this got started. The fire marshal is here on scene and working to determine how all of this got started. Of course, we'll continue to stay here and bring you the very latest. Reporting here in Ocean Hill, Brooklyn, Elijah Westbrook, CBS News, New York.
In a champagne supernova in the sky.
This is going to be in your head all day. Champagne Supernova by Oasis. You might hear it when the band goes on tour next year. They're reuniting after a 15-year hiatus. Oasis, of course, known for hits like Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger, will kick off their 14-date tour of the UK and Ireland next summer. The band split in 2009 after many years of fighting between brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher. Tickets go on sale Saturday, and Grant, today is going to be the day that we're going to throw it back to you.
Yes, stuck in our head for the rest of the week. Forget about today. My goodness. I'm really excited about Oasis coming back. I didn't even really know that they'd broken up, but here we are today, and we're hearing it, and it's that song that's stuck in our head. Speaking of wanting an Oasis, my goodness, the heat continues. Summer continues, doesn't it? The Midwestern states, actually 75 and almost 500,000 people underneath some sort of heat advisory, excessive heat warning, including portions of Philadelphia, where today and tomorrow, 63 Philadelphia schools are going to be releasing early because of this heat. A lot of kids went back to school yesterday already finding a little bit of a break coming because of all this heat. Big temperatures, and we're talking about triple-digit temperatures. The heat's across the Midwest today. That high-pressure system slides to the east tomorrow. That's why places like Philadelphia really deal with the big heat tomorrow. But that excessive heat is back towards the Midwest today. Places like St. Louis to Chicago having temperatures from the mid-90s to the triple digits, but everybody feeling like the triple digits because of that really intense humidity. You'd think the fall-like temperatures were here. Not so much the case, but there's that heat shifting to the east into places across the mid-Atlantic, into the Northeast. Philadelphia, 96 degrees tomorrow. Meanwhile, some relief across the Midwest, but it comes by way of severe weather expected later on today. So there's that severe weather across the Midwestern states today. Cooler temperatures on the way tomorrow. Meanwhile, even more fall-like conditions, Lindsay. We talked about this last time. 66 in the Pacific Northwest. The cooler air is coming. It's just knocking. It's taking its time, though, but it's arriving.
Making me want some apple cider. Grant, thanks so much. An encore of CBS Mornings is next. I'll see you back here at noon. This is CBS News 24/7.